This is the fourth installment of part one of the lecture History of Religion in China. Here's where we left off before. I was discussing features of Taoist religion. Notably, Taoism as a religion has been around, we think, potentially since the Han Dynasty, which is right at the turn of the BCE to CE, to the current era, all the way up to the modern day. So you can imagine how many different instantiations, different lineages, different interpretations have happened. But have transpired, have occurred through the ages. But there are a few themes that we can identify as Taoist that I think define what a practicing Taoist would believe about the world and about what their practices can achieve. We talked about extending life by harmonizing with Tao. The achievement of immortality was a very particular concern throughout much of imperial China. And Taoists took it to heart that if you could, through various practices, whether it's through meditation or through eating certain sorts of things or through focusing on the movements of qi through one's body, that one could achieve a harmonizing, a merging with Tao that would extend your life. Another theme is meditation and or withdrawal. So there's an idea that, as I spoke about before, these social constructs, these ways of understanding the world in terms of what's beneficial and what's not, in terms of how humans are socially and civilly, and these sorts of things can distract us, according to Taoists, from our true natural selves. So both meditation and withdrawal are the shutting out of these influences, the impelling one to forget all of these things so that one can meditate only and purely on what Tao is. There's also the typical picture of the Taoist hermit that actually physically withdraws from society to go live in the mountains. There's also the promotion, especially among those who live in Taoist monasteries in China, the contentedness with having little, that we shouldn't need a lot of different items that convey things like status in order to be our true authentic selves. We should, most Taoist hermits talk about the clothes on their back being all they need, or potentially not even those, maybe just the Tao being the only thing that sustains us. We don't need very many things in order to get along in this world. There's also a celebration of nature and a recognition of the importance of nature as a mirror that reflects our true selves back at us. There's the idea that if we are all a part of Tao, then the natural world is just as important, if not more so, than the human world. And this takes the growth of trees and the fluorescence, the blooming and the fruiting of plants to be metaphors for human life, something that we can watch and understand and know in order to tap in to the authentic part of ourselves. There's also the existence of a vast pantheon of Taoist gods in which, or for which, one can leave offerings or sacrifices, not farm animals, but fruits and things, at monasteries and temples throughout mainland, but especially in Taiwan, where this temple is, and Hong Kong. If you ask a Chinese person today what religion they are, right? First, there's the idea that all Chinese are atheists, right? All party members, all Communist Party members ought to be atheists. But the truth of the matter is much more complex. If you ask a Chinese person, they'd probably say that they are Taoist. And this is complicated for a lot of different reasons, but most of these, what we would call religious practices, have their roots in Taoist religion. Most of the temples are Taoist temples or Confucian temples, which we'll talk about later, but most of them are Taoist. Most of the gods are Taoist. And keep in mind that Buddhist gods are included, right? So when Buddhism came to China, the existing religions expanded to accommodate the different gods and the different beliefs of Buddhism. So many of the Buddhist gods are also Taoist gods, interestingly enough. Even in the modern day, one can go to a Taoist temple like this one and have your fortune read. You can, if you feel like you're housing some sort of malevolent spirit, you can have an exorcism performed. You can leave offerings for Taoist gods. You can pray. You can light incense. All of these different religious features all have their expression in what we now call Taoism. So Taoism has become this amalgam, so to speak, this collection of diverse expressions that all seek to capture this idea that we are members of a cosmos that we don't completely understand. And all of the cosmos are also enveloped or a part of or comprise, however you want to say it, Tao. So by seeking to understand and commune with Tao, we are seeking understanding and acceptance from all of the various features of the world. Here, we find a later depiction of Lao Tzu, who has achieved, according to some Taoist texts, has achieved the status of Tao itself. Lao Tzu becomes Tao. Lao Tzu is Tao. Remember, Lao Tzu is also the purported author of the Tao Te Ching. Notice the symbol that Lao Tzu is holding at his abdomen. We see the recognizable yin yang symbol that we've talked about, and we also see a collection of trigrams. So, whereas a hexagram was 6, a trigram is a collection of 3 lines. And the formation of the hexagrams is actually the combining of the trigrams, the stacking of the trigrams. So now you have a little bit more insight into the nature of the symbol that he's holding. So we have a few themes that have come out of the discussion so far that will carry into part 2. They are: 1, those who have died still have influence and power in the present. And this has come through in each of the things that we've talked about, each of the 2 types of divination as well as Taoism. That our own ancestors are a resource for us to tap in to the forces that shape the way things are. That the sages of old have left traces for us to follow to try to understand the world. That Lao Tzu, and who becomes Tao itself, create patterns and order for us to be able to conduct ourselves in the most authentic way. And if we appeal to all of these forces, if we seek to understand them, then we can create better futures for ourselves. And in a quite literal way, we can ask those extra human beings to help us out, right? Or to leave us alone, as it were, so that we can live in a harmonious way that in which we don't suffer strife, hardship, or confusion. So in all of these ways, those who have died still have influence in the present. 2, one must draw one's authority from the past in order to justify oneself in the present. In Chinese philosophy and religion, we don't really find the idea that you want to contribute something creative and novel and new to the world around you. Attempting to add something to all the things that already are can only create disruption. There's the idea that if you know the past, if you can get a grasp on all the things that have happened, you understand how it has shaped the present and how the past through the present shapes the future. So there was this concern in both history and philosophy as well as religion, that in order to make one's mark now, you use the authority from the past. The king would seek the approval of ancestors, right, through divination in order to justify his actions in the present. The religious initiate would boast their knowledge and understanding of Tao, of Lao Tzu, in order and present it as credentials for becoming a religious initiate, right? So for beginning, say, a Taoist, religious pilgrimage or journey, or seeking to become one of the lineage of a Taoist teaching, would could only do so with the approval of their teacher, right? Could only appeal to the past in order to move forward into the future. And even the state bureaucrat, for whom, I mean, if you think about written texts in ancient China, would only be available to those who could read, right? So we have elites like kings and everyone who lived in the kingdom, but also, and increasingly, it's a very famous trait of ancient Chinese civilization that state bureaucracies appear very, very early, and a condition of becoming employed is extensive knowledge of the past. The third feature is that the human world and the natural world are inextricably intertwined. They cannot be separated. And in fact, understanding our human place in it is understanding the natural world. The two can't be separated. And four, the circumstances of the world are the result of cyclical and you could say predictable patterns. A lot of Chinese philosophical and religious practice is knowing these patterns, right? So that's what we have learned from I Ching divination as well as Taoism, that the world isn't chaotic or random, that the world emerges in a cyclical way. And by attempting to understand, or in the Taoist language, merge with these changes, we can get a sense of what the world is as a whole in a way that can benefit us. This marks the end of part one of our lecture, The History of Religion in China. Thank you.